What's going on? It is your good sis Liz, and I am back with another episode. I'm laughing because I'm opening this up all casual, like it hasn't taken me 4 years and some change to record and post 8 episodes for one season. But you know what? We made it. And not just in the I finally uploaded the content kind of way, but in the I kept showing up even when it was hard kind of way. Because the truth is, this season wasn't just about creating a podcast and uploading content. It was about being obedient to God's nudge and not giving up. Even when the path is slow, the doubts are loud, the distractions and detours are endless, and the vision or the planning of it feels blurry. This journey forced me to confront procrastination, fear, insecurities, doubt, and perfectionism. And maybe that's where you are too. Maybe you feel something stirred inside of you, a new dream, a shift in direction, something that refuses to stay quiet. You wonder if it's God or is it your own thoughts? You wonder if you should wait or if you've waited too long already. Maybe you even started and it didn't go how you hoped, and now you're questioning if this was a big mistake. If that's you, this episode is for you. I want to walk you through this gently, honestly, and from a place of lived experience. Although this is the last episode of season 1, maybe, just maybe, it's the beginning of something new for you. And don't worry, for the 5 listeners I have remaining, season 2 is coming soon. But before we get there, I need to be real with you for a moment. This podcast, it didn't start because I had it all figured out, obviously. It started because I felt a nudge, a quiet, persistent whisper that wouldn't leave me alone. And I was scared. Scared it would flop, scared I wasn't qualified, scared I wouldn't be consistent enough to carry it through. There were so many moments I second-guessed everything. I wondered if I'd misunderstood the assignment, if I'd wasted time, if maybe I'd missed God completely. But looking back now, I could see it clearer. It was never a waste. It was a sacred space where God was strengthening my confidence, not just in my own voice, but in His timing, His calling, and the gifts that He placed within me. This season, it taught me how to choose obedience to God over the opinions, timelines, and expectations of people. It stretched me in ways I didn't even know I needed. So as we close out season 1, I want to leave you with this. Nothing is wasted if you're being obedient to God. Not the delays, not the false starts, not the failures, not even the fears. Because when you're walking with Him, even when the steps feel small, clumsy, or uncertain, He's using all of it. The confusion, the waiting, the silence, it's not pointless. It's purpose and progress. In this episode, we'll talk about how to recognize when God is nudging you towards something new, how to move forward even when the timing feels uncertain, and why nothing is wasted when you're walking in obedience. Let's start at the beginning. That quiet inner tug. You keep thinking about something, starting a business, writing a book, changing direction, going back to school, quitting something that's draining your soul. Whatever it is, it won't let you go. You're not even chasing it. It's like it's chasing you. Sometimes it's not just an idea. Sometimes it's God whispering into your spirit. God's voice doesn't always come with a lightning bolt. Sometimes it shows up as a gentle thought that just keeps circling your heart. Quiet, persistent, and hard to ignore. If you're not sure whether it's from God, try asking yourself these questions. Does it stretch me while still aligning with peace, not panic? Because God often calls us beyond comfort, but not into chaos. There may be nerves, but there's also a settled knowing. Does it align with God's character and principles, even if it challenges mine? Is it rooted in love, truth, growth, grace, humility? Or is it rooted in ego, fear, or escape? Does this dream serve only me? Or does it make space to serve others too? God's nudges often go beyond our personal gain and create impact for others. Does this feel like a calling or just a craving? Because cravings are urgent and impulsive. Callings often feel persistent and patient. And lastly, can I invite God into this? Or am I hiding this from Him? If we feel the need to keep it a secret, it's worth pausing. When God is trying to do something new and big in your life, the transition is usually uncomfortable. And the beauty is, you don't need to be a Bible scholar to hear from him. He speaks to the willing, to the open, to those who are asking honest questions and giving space for him to answer. Science actually gives us language for this too. There's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system, or RAS for short. Think of it like your brain's internal spotlight. Out of the thousands of things happening around you every day, the RAS helps filter what actually gets your attention. It highlights the things your brain considers important, especially if they're emotionally significant or tied to something you've been thinking about deeply. For example, have you ever thought about buying a specific kind of car and suddenly you start seeing that car everywhere? That's your RAS in action. The cars were always there, but now your brain is tuning in because it sees that information as relevant to you. The same thing happens when you're focused on a dream, an idea, or even a calling. Suddenly, you begin to notice patterns, signs, or conversations that seem to echo what's already on your heart. The RAS doesn't just kick in for major life goals, it responds to your intentions in everyday life too. Whether you're trying to grow spiritually, shift your mindset, or break old habits, your brain starts scanning the world for anything that supports that focus. Far from being random, this is your brain's way of bringing clarity, not confusion. And when your spiritual life is aligned with your values and desires, it's possible that your RAS is working hand in hand with your faith, helping you notice what God has already been whispering to you all along. So here's something to reflect on. What have you been noticing more often lately? What keeps showing up in your thoughts, conversations, or circumstances? It might not be a coincidence. It might be your spirit and your mind working together to draw your attention to something that matters. What if that persistent thought isn't random? What if it's revelation? Even if you do feel the nudge, how do you know when to move? Because sometimes it's not a lack of desire, it's a lack of clarity. You sense something stirring, but you're not sure if it's the right time, the right way, or if you're even the right person. If that's you, I want to take you into a story. No church background needed, no religious resume required. Let's talk about a man in the Bible named Gideon. No spotlight, no platform, just a man in hiding and a God who wasn't afraid to meet him there. Gideon lived during a time when his people, the Israelites, were under constant attack. A powerful enemy called the Midianites would invade their land, steal their food, and leave them starving and afraid. People were hiding in mountains and caves just to survive. And Gideon, he was doing his best to stay out of sight. He was actually trying to separate grain from stalks, kind of like shaking out the good parts of the wheat to make bread. Normally, you do that outside, where the wind can help blow away the useless parts. But Gideon was doing it at the bottom of a wine press, basically a hidden hole in the ground, because he was afraid of being seen and having his food stolen. He was tired, anxious, and just trying to make it through. Then something unexpected happens. And here's what I'll paraphrase from the Bible for clarity. An angel of the Lord appears to Gideon and greets him. So imagine hiding, just trying to keep your head down, when a messenger from God shows up and says, "The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor." Mighty man of valor? Like mighty warrior? He was calling out something in Gideon that hadn't even shown up on the outside yet. Gideon's response? Honest and unsure, like most of us would be. He said, "If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? Where are the miracles we heard about? It feels like God has left us." And still, God doesn't back away. He doesn't get offended by the questions. Instead, he leans in and says, "Go with the strength you have. I'm sending you." Gideon pushes back. "But how can I rescue anyone? My family's the weakest, and I'm the least important person in it." In other words, you got the wrong guy, and God still replies, "I will be with you." Gideon asked for signs from God to make sure he was hearing God correctly throughout this story, and God answered all of them. The journey with God isn't always about instant action. Sometimes it starts with questions, uncertainty, and small steps. Before Gideon ever steps into leadership, God gives him one quiet assignment. Go home and tear down the idols in your father's home. Because before God calls you out, he often calls you inward to heal, to realign, and to rebuild your foundation. To deal with what had been normal but really wasn't healthy all along. To deal with the quiet places no one sees but God. And here's the beauty. Gideon took his time. He questioned, he checked in, and God never rushed him. Just because God gives you a vision today doesn't mean he wants you to launch it tomorrow. Some visions need to grow. Some callings need time to take root. This actually reminds me of something psychologists call the incubation effect. There's this idea that even when you're not actively working on a decision, your mind and often your spirit are still processing in the background. You might not have full clarity yet, but that doesn't mean God isn't working. Sometimes stepping back gives your heart and mind the space to catch up with what God is saying. Sometimes you need to sit with the vision before you run with it. And like Gideon, it's okay to ask God for confirmation. Not out of fear, but out of a desire to want to walk in alignment, his way. So if you're unsure, pray. Ask for peace. Ask for clarity. Ask for a sign if you need one. God isn't afraid of your questions, and he knows exactly how to respond. But if you have already received clarity, if God has made it clear and you're just hesitating, don't let fear keep you in hiding and in disobedience. The world needs what God has placed inside you. Your steps of faith might be the answer to someone else's prayer. And sometimes, God often reveals the next step after you take the first one. So whether you're still praying through it or you've been told to go, take it seriously. Take it humbly, but also take it forward. Because the same God who met Gideon in hiding is still meeting people in quiet places, preparing them for public purpose. And he knows how to guide you every step of the way. Now, let's talk about the thing no one wants to admit. Let's say you did step out. You started the dream, you launched the project, you gave it everything, and it didn't work. Now you're left with disappointment, maybe even shame, and the haunting thought, did I hear God wrong? Let me gently offer you this. What we see as failure, God often uses as the foundation for purpose. Let's go back to Gideon's story. Eventually, yes, he did lead Israel into battle, but it didn't happen the way anyone expected. When it came time to face the Midianites, the enemy that had been terrorizing his people, Gideon gathered an army of 32,000 men. Still outnumbered, but at least it was something. Then God said to him, "You have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will then boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength." So God began to trim the army. First, God told Gideon to let anyone who was afraid go home. 22,000 men left, just like that. Now, Gideon is down to 10,000 men. Then God trims it again. This time, he tells Gideon to take the remaining men down to a stream and watch how they drink water. Some knelt down and put their faces straight into the water. Others scooped water with their hands and stayed alert as they drank. God told Gideon to keep the ones who stayed alert. In that group, just 300 men. So from 32,000 down to 300. And Gideon, the same man who once hid in a pit to thresh wheat, now stands with just a handful of men against an enemy army that was so large, the Bible says they were as thick as locusts and their camels were like the sand on the seashore. In other words, they were everywhere. Too many to count. It looked impossible. 300 men against thousands? Why would God do that? Because God didn't want Gideon to rely on numbers, or on status, or strength, or strategy. God wanted Gideon to trust. And the same applies to us. Sometimes the things that feel like loss is actually God stripping away the things we would have leaned on, just to remind us where our real strength comes from. God is making sure the foundation is trust in Him, not in talent, resources, or applause. So if you've stepped out and it didn't go how you thought, if you feel like you heard God, but it didn't look like a win, you might not be off course. You may not have seen the outcome you expected, but did you learn to depend on God in the dark? Did you grow in character, courage, or clarity? Then it wasn't wasted. Romans 8:28 reminds us, All things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Not some things, all things. From a psychology standpoint, researchers have studied what's called post-traumatic growth. The idea that people don't just recover from hardship, they often grow because of it. Not just bouncing back, but bouncing forward, sometimes resulting in greater clarity, stronger faith, or a more grounded identity. Gideon didn't come out of the battle the same way he went in, and neither do we. So that setback, it might have been the shaping ground for a more mature, focused, and faithful version of who you're called to be. God wastes nothing, not even what you thought was a waste of time. Now, let's get practical. Here are 7 small but powerful steps you can take this week, or maybe this month. Number 1, write what won't leave you alone. What's the idea or desire that keeps resurfacing? Write it down. We often dismiss the thing that won't leave us alone, but writing it down honors it. It says, I see you. I'm paying attention. And it's not just a journaling practice, it's brain science. Writing helps your brain process emotions, clear mental clutter, and turn what you're feeling into something you can understand and work through. It gives structure to what feels vague. The Bible even encourages us to write the vision and make it plain. And since God often speaks through patterns, nudges, and persistent thoughts, it's best to keep track of them. Number 2, train your thoughts. Your brain follows the direction of your inner dialogue. The questions you ask yourself and the answers you respond with can either fuel anxiety or open space for growth. Instead of having a fear-based mindset, shift this to a faith-based one. For example, instead of asking, what if no one supports me? Immediately respond to yourself with, what if the right people show up once I take the first step? Or instead of thinking, what if I'm not ready? Think, what if God is already preparing me in ways I can't even see? Reframing invites creativity and courage instead of fear. Your questions shape your perspective, and your perspective shapes your path. Training your thoughts means choosing faith when fear wants the mic. The Bible even encourages us to take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Number 3, reflect on lessons from the letdowns. Meaning, reflect on what didn't go as planned. Your brain doesn't grow from the experience alone. It grows from how you process it. Reflection turns pain into wisdom and hindsight into strategy. So ask yourself, what felt like failure in the moment, but actually shaped me in ways I didn't see until later? What did I learn about God, about myself, about what I truly value? You may not realize it, but some of your deepest clarity came from the places that didn't work out. There's a special kind of resilience that only shows up after the disappointment. And there's a kind of faith that's only built when the outcome doesn't match the expectation, but you kept going anyway. The Bible states, though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. Number 4, pray. You don't need a script. You don't need the right words. You just need to be real. Prayer isn't a performance. It's permission. Permission to pause, to breathe, to open up your whole self, questions, doubts, dreams, and all, in front of a God who already knows and still cares. From a scientific perspective, prayer calms the nervous system. It activates part of the brain connected to empathy, emotional regulation, and decision making. But spiritually, it does even more than that. It reminds you, you're not alone in this. You're not carrying it all by yourself. You're not responsible for figuring everything out before God will respond. And sometimes the breakthrough doesn't come in the outcome. It comes in the conversation. So don't wait until it's polished. Just pray. Talk to God like you would talk to someone that you feel safe with. Pause long enough to hear him speak back. The Bible encourages us to call to God, and he will answer us and tell us great and unsearchable things that we do not know. Number 5, talk to someone safe. You weren't meant to carry everything alone. God created us for connection, not just to be seen, but to be understood. When you speak what's been weighing on you, the fear, the idea, the uncertainty, it loses some of its grip. Not because the problems disappear, but because you're no longer facing it in isolation. There is healing in community. There is clarity in conversation. Studies even show that verbalizing your thoughts, especially with someone who is emotionally safe, helps lower anxiety, organize mental clutter, and bring clarity. But even more than the science, here's the spiritual truth. Sometimes God answers your prayer through the wisdom or presence of another person. It doesn't have to be a group. It doesn't have to be a therapist or a mentor, although that is beautiful if you have those. Start with one person who sees you clearly and listens without judgment. Someone who helps you remember what's true when your emotions are loud. The Bible reminds us plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Number 6, create space for silence. Noise is everywhere, and not just around us, but inside us too. The pressure to figure things out, the constant scroll, the nonstop doing. It's no wonder we can't always hear God clearly. There's no room for him to speak. But silence isn't emptiness. It's invitation. When you quiet the external noise, you give your soul space to breathe. When you pause long enough to just be, you create room to notice what's already stirring inside. You don't need hours of solitude to hear from God. Start with 5 minutes. No distractions, no agenda, just space. Let your mind settle. Let your heart soften. Let your spirit tune in. Because sometimes clarity doesn't come from more information. It comes from less interference. Stillness is not passive. It's powerful. It's sacred. And it might be where your next step becomes clear. God's word says for us to be still and know that he is God. After all, God's whisper isn't competing with the noise. It's waiting for your attention. Number 7, track the patterns. God doesn't always shout. Sometimes he whispers in patterns. Through repeated verses, conversations that echo each other, a phrase you can't shake. These moments may be subtle, but they aren't random. That's why keeping a journal of these nudges is so powerful. When you write down what keeps showing up, thoughts, themes, scriptures, even gut feelings, you begin to see the fingerprints of God more clearly. What feels like a coincidence might actually be confirmation. The more you document, the more your spiritual eyes adjust. Your awareness sharpens, your trust deepens, and you realize God's been speaking. You're just learning to tune in. The Bible tells us that God does speak in one way or another, yet man does not perceive it. This verse is a reminder that God often speaks in ways we don't immediately recognize. And sometimes it's not about God needing to speak louder. It's about us needing to pay attention to listen more closely. As we close this final episode of season 1, here's what I want you to know. God doesn't need your perfection. He just wants your participation. So if something's pulling at your heart, start small. Start scared. Start in prayer, but start. And if it doesn't go the way you hoped, that's okay. Sometimes the win was in the yes, not the outcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. And if you listen to every episode, which the beginning is very different from the end, I thank you. I thank you for walking this season with me. I thank you for probably even noticing the growth in the episodes or in my voice or in the information I'm sharing throughout the season. I'm proud of me. I'm proud of you. And I can't wait to see what God does next. In you and in me. Stay tuned for season 2.